Let me start with something that will likely make you uncomfortable. If you're keeping the majority of your capital in a bank account, simply waiting for the ideal time to invest, you're not actually playing it safe. You are consciously selecting a guaranteed loss. And I can easily prove this using simple arithmetic that any high school student should understand. Yet, for some reason, very intelligent people miss this crucial point constantly. Here is the straightforward math nobody wants to face. If inflation is running at 3% annually and your savings account is only paying you 0.5%, you are effectively losing 2.5% of your purchasing power every single year. That isn't a speculative risk. That is a fundamental certainty. Over a period of a decade, you will forfeit about 25% of what that money can actually buy. Not what the number says on your bank statement, but what it's capable of doing in the actual economy. And that projection assumes inflation remains at the government's conservative, polite number. Now, I understand what you're thinking, but Charlie, cash feels secure. I can see the stable number. It doesn't fluctuate or go down. That is precisely the problem. You are meticulously watching the wrong number. You are measuring nominal dollars when you should be measuring real purchasing power. It's like celebrating that your car's speedometer is still functioning perfectly while ignoring the fact that you're rapidly running out of fuel. Psychology at play here is completely predictable. We humans suffer severely from what I call deprival superreaction tendency. We absolutely hate losing something we already possess more than we enjoy gaining something new. Therefore, we clutch our cash tightly, terrified of any market volatility, while the slow creep of inflation quietly pickpockets us year after year. We are so afraid of a 20% temporary market drop that might fully recover that we readily accept a guaranteed 30% loss in real value over a decade. That behavior is simply not rational. That's just an expensive form of fear. Let me give you a principle that has saved me from countless serious mistakes. Always invert. Instead of asking, what should I buy? Constantly ask, what are the ways I am absolutely certain to lose? When you invert the cash question, the undeniable answer becomes obvious. Holding significant cash in an inflationary environment is choosing a certain loss over an uncertain but probable gain. You are knowingly picking the guaranteed wrong answer simply because it provides psychological comfort. I initially learned this concept from studying physics, not economics. In physics, there's a powerful concept called entropy. Things naturally move from a state of order toward disorder unless you consistently add new energy. Cash purchasing power operates under entropy. It naturally decays unless you actively do something to counteract it. The second crucial mental model you need to internalize is compound interest, except in this scenario, it's tragically working against you. Albert Einstein supposedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, but he should have certainly mentioned that its devastating effects work in both directions. When inflation compounds at 3% and your bank returns are essentially zero, you are watching reverse compound interest systematically destroy your personal wealth in slow motion. It's painless enough that you don't fully notice it year to year, but it is absolutely devastating over multiple decades. Here's what most people fail to grasp. They mistakenly believe that volatility equals risk, but the real risk is the permanent loss of purchasing power. A well-diversified stock portfolio might drop 15% in a single bad year. Sure, that's possible. But cash is guaranteed to drop 3% in a good year, and that loss is permanent. You never get that purchasing power back. Warren and I did not build Berkshire Hathaway into what it is today by holding mountains of idle cash. We held businesses, productive assets that reliably throw off cash earnings, have the ability to raise prices, and can adapt effectively to inflation. When we bought See's Candies back in 1972 for $25 million, many people felt we had drastically overpaid. But See's had the crucial ability to raise prices. The strength of the brand had pricing power. Cash in a bank account has no such inherent power. It just passively sits there, constantly shrinking in real terms, while productive assets grow, adapt, and earn. Let me outline 5 specific assets that are fundamentally safer than cash. Safer in the only way that truly matters, which is preserving and actively growing your real purchasing power. And I will explain the mental models behind each one so you can learn to think for yourself. First, productive businesses. What most lay people refer to as stocks, though I prefer to think of them more accurately as partial ownership stakes in actual operating companies. Here's the key economic insight. A well-managed business that possesses pricing power naturally adjusts its revenue for inflation. Think about the Coca-Cola Company, of which Berkshire owns a very significant piece. When inflation hits the market, Coca-Cola doesn't just sit there passively losing value like a dollar bill. It simply raises its prices. Its earnings then grow. Therefore, the real value of your ownership stake grows along with it. Now, I am certainly not telling you to buy just any stock on the market. Most stocks are grossly overpriced most of the time, and most individual investors are their own single worst enemies. But owning fractional pieces of great businesses, companies with strong established brands, low capital requirements, and real pricing power is fundamentally different from simply holding cash. The long-term math is straightforward. Over the past century, stocks have consistently returned approximately 10% annually, while inflation has averaged roughly 3%. That translates to a real return of 7%. Cash has returned essentially zero real return and often registers as negative. But here's what you must deeply understand about your circle of competence. If you don't genuinely understand businesses, if you can't properly read a financial statement, if you are prone to panic and selling during market downturns, then stocks are not safer for you. You will make them dangerous, solely through your own erratic behavior. This is precisely where most financial advice completely goes wrong. People offer universal prescriptions without adequately accounting for the single biggest variable, your own psychology and knowledge base. Know what you know, and far more importantly, know what you don't know. The second asset is productive real estate. Note carefully that I said productive. Not just any property, but property that consistently generates an income stream. A rental property that throws off reliable cash flow is a productive asset, just like a profitable business. Real estate offers several distinct advantages in an inflationary environment. Rents tend to rise in correlation with inflation. The underlying mortgage, if you have one, remains fixed. You are effectively paying back the loan using progressively cheaper dollars over time, and the underlying asset itself often appreciates as construction costs naturally increase. But once again, the circle of competence is paramount. Being a landlord is work. It requires constant judgment, maintenance, and careful tenant selection. If you don't know what you're doing, you will inevitably buy the wrong property at an inflated price and then wonder why real estate doesn't work for you. Warren and I have owned a significant amount of real estate through Berkshire, but always as productive assets, buildings that businesses operate from, land that serves an agricultural purpose, never for pure speculation, always for production. There is a crucial distinction there. Here is a simple test for any real estate investment. If the property stopped appreciating in value tomorrow, would you still want to own it based solely on the income it generates? If the honest answer is no, you are speculating, not investing. And speculation is just a sophisticated term for gambling. The third asset is yourself, your skills, and your earning power. This is the one asset that literally everyone possesses, and it is criminally underinvested by most people. Benjamin Franklin understood this deeply when he said, "An investment in knowledge pays the best interest." Here's why this matters greatly in a discussion about cash. If you are early in your career and have $50,000 sitting idle in a bank account, you might be making a terrible mistake. Capital could be used to fund a critical education, training, or the initial stages of a business that multiplies your earning power tenfold. I have watched people painfully scrimp and save, feeling very proud of their small cash cushion, while their valuable skills rapidly become obsolete. They are so focused on protecting the small amount of cash they have that they completely ignore the massive opportunity to become inherently more valuable in the marketplace. That is fundamentally backward thinking. Your earning power is the present value of all your potential future earnings. If you can responsibly increase that future income stream by 20% through acquiring better skills, you have created far more real value than you could ever have by investing that same money into almost any external asset. And unlike stocks, your fundamental skills cannot be taken away from you by market crashes. But, and this is highly important, investing in yourself only succeeds if you are brutally honest about what skills actually matter. Learning how to knit underwater baskets doesn't count. You must learn skills that genuinely create value for others, that are difficult to replicate, and that align with real market demand. I spent my life learning across a wide array of disciplines, law, mathematics, psychology, physics, and business, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because solving complex problems absolutely requires utilizing tools from many different toolboxes. You cannot construct a solid house using just a hammer. The fourth asset, and this often surprises people, is high-quality bonds in specific situations. Note carefully that I said high quality in specific situations, not just any bonds, and certainly not the majority of bonds in the current economic environment. Here is the mental model to apply. A bond is simply a promise from a borrower to pay you a specific sum of money in the future. The critical question is, what will that future money actually be worth when you finally receive it? If you purchase a 30-year bond yielding 4%, and inflation is expected to run at 3%, you are barely ahead, and you have locked up your capital for 3 full decades. However, short-term bonds from highly credit-worthy entities can serve a very important limited purpose. They are not there to make you rich. They are there to give you optionality, keeping your financial powder dry for when genuine opportunities inevitably appear, while still earning a yield that is slightly better than cash. Warren often mentions that we keep cash and cash equivalents at Berkshire, but notice he never keeps an excessive amount of it. Usually just enough to cover immediate obligations and swiftly seize large opportunities. The bonds serve as a temporary parking place, never a final destination. The common mistake people make is treating bonds as the ultimate source of safety when they are truly just slightly less cash-like than cash itself. In a persistently high inflation environment, bonds can be just as dangerous as cash, sometimes even more so because they legally lock your money away. Here is a simple rule. If a bond's yield does not significantly exceed your expected rate of inflation, you are volunteering to lose purchasing power in slow motion. At least with pure cash, you fully maintain liquidity. Bad bonds give you all the downsides of cash with none of the necessary flexibility. The fifth asset is useful hard assets. These are tangible things that maintain or grow their value because they are inherently useful to humans, not just because a crowd of people agrees that they are. This is very different from speculating in gold or volatile cryptocurrency, which I'll address in a moment. I am referring to assets like productive land, essential machinery that reliably generates income, and even a reliable vehicle if it directly enables you to earn your livelihood. These are tangible items that do something, that serve a function that would still be critically important, even if the financial system experienced a severe crisis. Now, let me be perfectly clear about gold. A lot of people mistakenly believe gold is the ultimate answer to inflation. But gold is passive, it just sits there. It doesn't produce anything. It doesn't throw off any earnings. You purchase it hoping that some other person will pay you even more for it later. That is not investing, that is speculation with a very old, ancient pedigree. Warren often jokes that we could take all the gold ever mined in the world, form it into one giant cube, and it wouldn't produce anything of value except the need for more expensive security guards. Meanwhile, for the same equivalent amount of money, you could purchase businesses that reliably generate billions in actual earnings every single year. Which choice sounds more rational to you? Hard assets only make economic sense if they are productive, a farm that consistently grows crops, not just farmland you're hoping to quickly flip. Essential tools that enable you to build things, not collectibles you pray will appreciate in value. Function must always prevail over hope. The common unifying thread in all 5 of these superior assets is this: they all actively do something. Businesses actively produce goods and services. Real estate provides shelter for people and businesses. Skills enable you to create market value. Even bonds, when chosen wisely, provide crucial financial optionality. They are active, not passive. Cash is inherently passive. It just passively sits there, slowly decaying in real terms, waiting for you to make a decision with it. The question isn't whether cash has a valid role. Of course it does for your near-term needs in maintaining opportunistic flexibility. The critical question is whether it deserves to be your main financial strategy. Now, let's discuss why smart, rational people constantly make this severe mistake, because understanding the underlying psychology is paramount. It is not an issue of low intelligence. Some extremely intelligent people are terrible with money. It's about predictable patterns of human misjudgment. First, there is what I call the social proof tendency. Everyone you know keeps their money in the bank. Your parents likely did it. Your friends currently do it. It instantly feels like the responsible adult thing to do, so you simply do it too, without ever critically examining whether it actually makes any mathematical sense. But just because absolutely everyone does something does not inherently make it right. During the Weimar Republic in Germany, people who safely kept their savings in cash were financially wiped out. The socially normal thing to do was also the financially catastrophic thing to do. Social proof is a terrible, often dangerous guide for making critical financial decisions. Second, there is availability misweighing tendency. The emotional pain of losing money in a sudden market crash is vivid and highly memorable. It's plastered all over the news. People talk about their losses endlessly. Those vivid stories stick firmly in your mind. However, the quiet, steady erosion of inflation is nearly invisible and highly abstract. Therefore, you naturally fear the wrong thing. You can vividly see a stock drop 20% in a single year. You cannot easily see your purchasing power drop 3% per year for a full decade. The second loss is actually much worse. It's a 30% loss and it's permanent. But the first feels worse because it is immediate and vivid. That is your brain actively lying to you. Third, there is the deprival superreaction tendency, which I mentioned earlier. We hate the feeling of losing what we possess so intensely that we will engage in irrational behaviors just to avoid the feeling of a potential loss. Even if it means accepting a certain loss, inflation, to avoid a potential uncertain loss, market volatility. The solution here is not to completely ignore these powerful tendencies. You can't. You are fundamentally human. You will always feel them. The true solution is to know they exist. Name them immediately when you see them in action, and build disciplined systems that actively protect you from your own flawed psychology. Here is my system, which you can easily adapt. I decided long ago what specific percentage of assets should reside in different categories based purely on rational analysis, never emotion. Then I stick to that plan. I rebalance when necessary. I do not check prices constantly. I do not allow fear or greed to alter the rational plan. This is not complicated advice. It's actually incredibly boring. But boring and rational decisively beats exciting and emotional over any meaningful time horizon. The tortoise beats the hare, not because he's faster, but because he doesn't frantically sprint in random excited directions. Let me offer you a simple framework for thinking about your own unique financial situation, because I cannot tell you exactly what you should do. I don't know your circumstances, your knowledge, or your temperament, but I can provide you with the essential questions to ask yourself. First question, what is my circle of competence? What do I genuinely and deeply understand? If you truly understand businesses, perhaps you should hold primarily stocks. If you deeply understand real estate, perhaps that should be your primary focus. If you don't understand either well, perhaps you should focus on low-cost index funds and immediately developing your professional skills. Second question, what is my true risk? Not the daily volatility I see on a screen, but the actual probability that I will not have sufficient purchasing power to live the life I want in the future. For most people, the true long-term risk is inflation completely destroying their savings, not a temporary market decline. Third question, what is my time horizon? If you absolutely need the money in 6 months, fine, keep it in cash. You have no rational choice. But if you genuinely don't need the money for 10 or 20 years, why would you consciously choose an asset that is guaranteed to lose value over that entire period? Fourth question, what are the second-order consequences? This is where most people stop their thinking process too early. They think cash is safe and stop there. But the second-order consequence is that safe cash leads to a poor retirement, severely reduced future options, and having to work much longer than you actually want. Fifth question, what does inversion tell me? If I hold mostly cash for the next 20 years, what is the most likely outcome? Can I accept that outcome? If the answer is no, what fundamental changes should I make today? These are not merely rhetorical questions. I strongly suggest you actually write down your answers. You will be completely shocked how much clarity you gain from simply thinking on paper. Most people never bother to do this. They just react emotionally and desperately hope for the best. Now, here is something else that makes people deeply uncomfortable, but it must be addressed. The reason most people remain poor is not primarily a lack of external opportunity, it is a lack of rationality. They consistently make emotional decisions, follow the crowd, actively avoid the necessary math, and then wonder why their financial life never truly improves. You cannot think yourself rich through positive thinking or affirmations or any of that other nonsense. But you can think yourself not poor by systematically avoiding stupid, predictable mistakes, by understanding the devastating power of compound interest, and by not voluntarily choosing to lose your purchasing power. Warren and I are not immensely rich because we are some form of superhuman geniuses. We are rich primarily because we are rational, patient, and we consistently don't do stupid things. We don't panic sell. We don't chase every hot new trend. We don't confuse random activity with genuine accomplishment. We just try to not be an idiot consistently over many, many decades. The sheer power of this approach is that it is accessible to anyone. You don't need a high IQ. You don't need insider information. You don't need luck. You just need to be rational, honest with yourself, and patient. That's all. Those three character traits beat brilliance nearly every time. Here is a concrete example from our own personal experience. In the late 1990s, everyone we knew was making enormous money in technology stocks. The dot-com bubble was at its peak. People called us dinosaurs for not participating. They publicly laughed at us for holding boring, old businesses like See's Candies and insurance companies. Then the bubble suddenly burst. People instantly lost fortunes. But we did not, because we were simply not playing that speculative game. We rigidly stuck to what we understood, bought at sensible prices, and let everyone else chase the temporary excitement. Being rational and patient looked stupid right up until the moment it looked brilliant. The exact same pattern has been repeated countless times throughout history. People get overly excited, chase high returns, panic when things inevitably turn, and lose significant money. Meanwhile, the rational approach, buying productive assets at sensible prices and quietly holding them for the long term, just quietly works. It's not exciting, but it works. Now let me address the biggest elephant in the room. What about emergencies? Don't you absolutely need cash for emergencies? Of course you do. I am not suggesting you put every single dollar you possess into stocks and pray nothing goes wrong. That would be profoundly stupid. The rule of thumb is very simple. Keep 3 to 6 months of living expenses in cash or easily accessible cash equivalents. That is your non-negotiable emergency fund. That is your sleep well at night money. That is the car broke down and the roof is leaking money. Keep it highly liquid, keep it absolutely safe. Do not invest it. But, and this distinction is absolutely crucial, 3 to 6 months of expenses is not 3 to 6 years of your income. If you earn $100,000 a year and spend $60,000, your necessary emergency fund should be between $15,000 and $30,000, not $300,000. The math must matter. I frequently see highly intelligent people with $200,000 sitting idle in a savings account for emergencies when they only spend $40,000 a year. That is not prudent emergency planning. That is financial malpractice. You have 5 years of expenses passively sitting idle, losing 3% purchasing power annually when you only logically need 6 months. The rest of that capital should be actively working for you in productive assets, in businesses that grow, in skills that enhance your earning potential, in anything that preserves and actively grows your real purchasing power. That's not a risky choice, that's the most responsible choice. Here is another uncomfortable truth. The entire financial services industry often gives you terrible self-serving advice because their underlying incentives do not align with yours. They primarily make money from activity, from fees, and from you being scared and needing their constant help. They do not make money from you being rational and patiently holding assets. Therefore, they actively sell you complicated, high-fee products. They tell you that you desperately need an expensive advisor to navigate complex markets. They imply that doing nothing, just patiently holding great businesses for decades, is somehow irresponsible. It's absolute nonsense, but it is highly profitable nonsense for them. The incentive to give slightly bad advice is immense. If an advisor tells you to buy a low-cost index fund and patiently hold it for 30 years, you won't need them again. But if they tell you the market is volatile and complex and you need their active management, well, now you're paying them annual fees forever. I'm not claiming all financial advisors are bad. Some are truly excellent. But you absolutely must understand what incentives are truly at play. Are they paid a transparent hourly rate for advice, or do they earn huge commissions on the products they successfully sell you? That difference matters enormously. The best financial advice I can possibly give you is free. Spend less than you earn. Invest the difference intelligently in productive assets you genuinely understand. Be patient. Don't do stupid things. That's the entire secret. Everything else is simply details and optimization around those few core principles. But people simply don't want to hear that. They desperately want a secret. They want the one weird trick. They want to believe there is a hidden, complex strategy that will make them rich without requiring any discipline or patience. There simply isn't one. I am sorry, but there just isn't. The secret that isn't actually a secret is that time and rationality consistently beat cleverness and manic activity. The person who buys great businesses at fair prices and holds them for 40 years will decisively beat the person who trades constantly, chases every fleeting trend, and pays huge fees to active managers. History proves this truth repeatedly. Let me give you one final mental model that if you simply hold for 10 years, the market has never failed to fully recover and reach new highs. If you simply hold for 20 years, you have always made money. Always. Not sometimes, always. Second, you absolutely don't have to invest everything simultaneously. Dollar cost averaging, investing a set amount regularly over time, completely eliminates the timing problem. Sometimes you will buy high, sometimes you will buy low, and it perfectly averages out. It's simple, it's highly effective, and it completely removes the emotional decision-making. Third, the market might crash right after you invest, sure, but it might also shoot up 30% right after you invest and then crash, leaving you still significantly ahead of where you started. You cannot accurately predict timing. Nobody can. So make a rational long-term decision and commit to executing it. The alternative, waiting endlessly for the perfect time to invest, is choosing guaranteed loss, inflation, to avoid a potential uncertain loss market drop. You're actively losing 3% per year to inflation while waiting for a crash that might not come, not be as severe as you fear, or might recover much faster than you expect. Here is a principle I've lived by: when you can't accurately predict the outcomes, focus entirely on the process. You cannot control whether the market goes up or down next year, but you absolutely can control whether you are acting rationally, whether you are appropriately diversified, and whether you are staying within your circle of competence. A good process, consistently applied over long periods, ultimately leads to good outcomes. A bad process occasionally gets lucky, but it usually leads to financial disaster. The drunk driver sometimes manages to make it home safely. That does not, however, make drunk driving a good strategy. Let me close with this vital thought. The title of this discussion was ostensibly about assets superior to cash. But the deeper, enduring lesson is fundamentally about rationality versus raw emotion, about second-order thinking versus first-order knee-jerk reactions, about long-term planning versus short-term comfort. Cash is not evil. It serves a crucial purpose. But treating it as your primary asset, your ultimate safe harbor, or your foundational financial strategy, that is a disastrous mistake born from natural human psychology running headfirst into an immutable mathematical reality. And math always wins eventually. The 5 assets I've meticulously discussed: productive businesses, productive real estate, your own skills, strategic bonds, and useful hard assets, are not magic solutions. They are simply rational, proven responses to a real world where inflation exists and productivity reliably compounds. They represent the choice of reality over emotional comfort. Your job is not to passively memorize what I've said and blindly implement it. Your job is to think, to deeply understand the underlying principles, to correctly apply them to your own unique situation, to honestly know your circle of competence, to be brutally honest about your own predictable psychology, and to build guardrail systems that actively protect you from yourself. If you take away only one thing from this entire discussion, take this: invert the question. Don't ask, how can I get rich? Ask, how can I avoid staying poor? The answer to the second question is crystal clear. Don't volunteer to lose your valuable purchasing power. Don't confuse nominal numbers for real, tangible value. Don't let your fear make you poorer than you need to be. I'm 99 years old as I'm speaking this, and I've spent the majority of that time simply watching people make the same predictable mistakes with their mon. The same fundamental mistakes repeated over and over across many generations. Not because people are unintelligent, but precisely because they are human. The true antidote to human nature is not some superhuman willpower or extraordinary intelligence. It is awareness, robust systems, and patience. Know your inherent biases. Build clear guardrails. Think long term. That's not the exciting advice you wanted, but it's the only advice that actually works. Warren and I successfully built Berkshire Hathaway from a single failing textile mill into one of the most valuable corporations in the world. We did not achieve that by being flashy or clever. We achieved it by being rational, consistently patient, and supremely consistent. We simply avoided making stupid mistakes. We let the enormous power of compound interest do its relentless work. That's all. You can absolutely do the same thing on a smaller personal scale. You won't build a company worth hundreds of billions, but you can build a comfortable retirement. You can successfully avoid poverty. You can make rational, calculated decisions that genuinely serve your future self. That is well within reach for anyone truly willing to think clearly. The world ultimately rewards rationality in the long run, even though it often rewards irrationality in the short run. Be patient, be disciplined, be honest with yourself. And for heaven's sake, don't keep all your valuable money in cash and then sit there wondering why you are not getting ahead financially. Now go think about your specific situation. Write down your honest answers to those 5 crucial questions I gave you. Look at the actual numbers, what you realistically earn, what you actually spend, what amount you have sitting in cash, and what you have wisely invested. Get brutally honest with yourself. Then calmly make a plan based purely on rationality, not on emo. Based on math, not on feelings. Based on long-term outcomes, not on short-term comfort. And then stick to it. Don't let fear change your plan. Don't let greed change your plan. Just execute consistently. That is how you ultimately win, not by being a genius, but by being consistently not stupid. Not by trying to time the market, but by simply giving time to the market. Not by finding some secret, but by diligently applying the obvious, boring truths that everyone knows, but very few people actually follow. The choice is now completely yours. You can keep your money in cash, watching it slowly lose value, feeling safe while getting genuinely poorer. Or you can invest rationally in productive assets, experience some temporary volatility, and successfully build real wealth over time. One feels safe, one is safe. They are not the same thing. I know which path I would choose. I know which path I have chosen every single day for 8 decades. And I'm telling you, the math does not lie. The psychology is completely predictable. The solution is entirely straightforward. Now it is your turn to decide whether you will act on this reality.